Hey everybody, how's it going? So we are actually on Ashford, finishing up chapter 2. I did find out we end actually in the middle of July, so I was off by a little bit. And so something to consider, we've got to speed it up a little bit. So chapters 3 and 4 this week. And starting with pregnancy. So, um, assessing expectant parents. Um, I'll use myself as an example. I was 42 for my firstborn, so I was a little different than the average parent. You could have parents as young as 14, 18, 22, depending on when folks get pregnant. And again, it's still law, their choice to keep it or not. I know that in the Supreme Court that could be changed this month, but as a social worker, we want to assess their expectations. So assessing the expectant parents, and here's some of the stuff like their attachments and commitments, how they are mentally representing the fetal infant, past history of social and professional support, if they have that, history of loss, seeing if they have any traumas that could affect things, and then sense of security. And then also work and parental leave policy. So if they are working, to see if they have paid time off. Um, Here is the biophysical dimension. This is kind of how the cells make their way through the body, and see if I can zoom in on any of that because it's the biophysical dimension. You've got the ovum, so stages of prenatal development. Um, a mature egg will run down the fallopian tube, and if it is fertilized up here, the hope is that it does not attach in here, as they have a certain term like ectopic pregnancy that can be dangerous because you don't want it to grow in the fallopian tube. So within like a day and a half, it's already doubling to 2 cells. In 2 days, it's at 4 cells, then 16 to 32 cells in 3 days. And then as it grows big enough, continued division of formation of inner cell mass, and the embryo then will go to the uterine lining. And let's see if they actually have a good video of this one because it is interesting. They have cameras that they can see inside of this pretty well nowadays. And then videos. So about implantation. There's a few good ones actually, and there's quite a few that kind of shows how it breaks down. And then, hello, Dr. Lichtenberg, how are you? Glad you're checking in on our class. So, getting one of the ovums and implantation behavior. So, I'm going to go with this one just to give us kind of a view of.
So it's been about a week since you've been fertilized. You used to be an egg until sperm found you. You went through a zygote stage and you cleaved, dividing into multiple cells, and you finally become a blastocyst. And you've been bouncing around in the fallopian tube for a little while, but you finally made it into the endometrial cavity within the uterus. And you start bumping against this nice endometrial lining. And that looks like a great place to get nutrients. In fact, you'd like to start the process of implantation. But at this point, you're still stuck inside this shell, this thick layer of glycoproteins that are surrounding you called the zona pellucida. Well, good thing about this time, your zona pellucida is starting to finally disintegrate away. So I'm going to erase bits of it here. You can see it's starting to fall apart. And your outer cells are becoming exposed. You're hatching out of your zona pellucida. But the endometrium isn't sitting still either. In fact, it's anticipating your arrival, and the endometrial lining is proliferating. In fact, it's developing these valleys here. You come to rest in one of these valleys, and that's called a crypt. In here, your zona pellucida is still disintegrating away, and your outer layers of cells can come directly in contact. And this contact between the two cell layers is called apposition. Now, at this point, you're not really firmly embedded at the endometrium. You're just kind of resting on top of it. You can be easily dislodged. What you'd like to do is get really stuck in there so that you can start the process of nutrient transfer. And this outer cell layer that we've mentioned before, these are called trophoblasts. They start to multiply. In fact, they don't only multiply, but they start invading in. You can see them here, invading into the endometrial tissue. Now this gets you good and stuck, and this is called adhesion. But the uterine endometrial cells aren't sitting still either. They continue to divide, they get larger and larger, and pretty soon you're entirely embedded within the endometrium. But that's not the only thing that your endometrium is doing. Your endometrium has these blood vessels within it. And really what they are is actually just collections of blood that's slowly moving around. They are fed by blood vessels from the uterine arteries, but as they get bigger, they become somewhat irregular, and then they start to coalesce, and they form these large pools of blood. And at the same time, your trophoblasts keep dividing. Something interesting is happening to your trophoblasts. You can see I'm drawing them here in pink. They're starting to get bigger. They're actually starting to fuse. You get these large cell conglomerations. These are actually multinucleated cells that are growing out into the endometrium. And because they look so different, we've got to give them a different name. So we call them syncytial trophoblasts. Now I know that's a mouthful, but remember we started with trophoblasts. So we've got that as well. And syncytio is just a root that means combined or fused. And the syncytium is just a fusion of a bunch of cells. And so here you can have a syncytium of trophoblasts, and so they call it a syncytio trophoblast. But that leaves us with the problem of what we call our original cells, and we've got to give them a new name too. So these ones that haven't formed a syncytium, we call cytotrophoblasts. And same thing, they come from trophoblasts.
All right, so I'm not expecting you guys to memorize all the names of those. If you were taking biology, I would, but essentially you've got fertilization and then implantation, 1 to 4 weeks with a different stage. So from 2 to 7 weeks, you have the embryo. And that's because when they measure a woman's pregnancy, it is 40 weeks, which is about 10 months total. So you can have different things that come up and have, hello, how are you?
Good.
You guys coming to class today?
Oh, I can't spell.
What are you
Embryo.
what are we learning about?
We are doing the stages of prenatal development.
I know that. I've been pregnant enough times.
Yes. So we're just on the embryo, 2 to 7 weeks. Keeper. Is that a keeper?
You're a keeper.
Yeah. What's up with this?
I guess the podium's a keeper.
Oh,
It
you
is a
guys are
podium.
throwing stuff away, or is it
They're going to remove the furniture, give us new desks.
nice?
So I have to keep this because I don't think you'll get one of these.
Oh.
And so I do keep this too.
Probably. It's nice stuff.
So I want to make sure we're keeping all the
So-
things that we need. Do you guys use a podium or do you use the here?
I used to use it a lot, especially when it was like in person and people showed up. But since COVID and everybody's like
Well, then we'll
watched
keep
it
it,
on
'cause it might be-
videos,
What about those speakers? Why would you keep those? These in the
I
back.
bet they're pretty sweet.
They look nice.
They look fun. Is Johar here today?
No,
What?
he's in that thing. He's at a conference.
San Diego for a whole week?
Yeah, and it's funny because I told him he owes me.
Yeah.
He knows he owes me. He's like, Edison was like, you told her Fridays home and Tuesdays, and why is she working on a Tuesday and Friday?
Right. Huh.
You know my husband, he hasn't done before because he's been here long enough, he can't be shit can. They won't
Yes.
shit can my husband. So if we ever have anything to say, we just send it through him, like a messenger.
So he can tell them that.
He can tell me that's wrong.
I'm gonna go to
How's the
San
wife
Diego.
doing?
So far so good.
What number are we
Hanging in
at?
there. Gosh, it's
8, 9?
coming on New Year's, so I don't even know what that would be.
We're almost 12.
Yeah.
It'd
It's
be-
either
that
New Year's or the 7th, the 1st or the 7th.
was crazy as I was 1 month before that, exactly. So she's at the 8, 9, 10. That's good.
It's
It's okay, so I can snuggle your baby and leave mine. Like, I'll leave my kid at home and come to your house.
progesterone is insane. Yeah.
Come sleep. Snuggle, snuggle, go home.
Yeah.
Sleep good. You be no sleep.
Right. That's right.
That's how we do it.
Yeah.
Yours, return.
Then I don't get to sleep.
Exactly.
See you guys.
This is how a human gets made. Every one of us started out this way. We've a pretty good idea what happens over the 9 months it takes to produce a newborn. But there's this one bit that's been missing, right at the beginning, before this animation even starts. The very first few weeks. Now armed with new ways of growing human embryos in the lab, scientists are learning what the very beginning of human development looks like. For decades, studying this crucial early time in a human embryo's development was a technical headache. Embryos are hard to get and keep alive outside the body. And it's an ethical challenge. Guidelines put together in the late 70s and 80s prevent scientists from growing embryos for longer than 14 days. Despite the hurdles, scientists do know a bit about what happens in those critical weeks, often from animal studies or rare human tissue samples. They know that sperm fertilizes egg, and one cell grows to 2, 4, 8, and so on. Around day 5 or 6, the blob starts to feature different types of cell. Scientists call this blob a blastocyst. All being well, the cells in the blastocyst begin to differentiate. 1 week in, it implants into the wall of the uterus. What happens next has been a bit of a mystery. By implanting itself into the womb's wall, the embryo basically hides, and that makes studying it in humans impossible. One way of exploring this crucial time is to study embryos donated by people who no longer need them for fertility treatment. In the last few years, several labs have developed new ways to nurture these embryos. Their techniques have allowed them to start building a picture of human development that's more detailed than ever before. Here's a day 6 embryo growing in a lab. Cells destined to become the actual fetus are tagged in green. Those that go on to form the placenta in blue. By day 8, the cells are sorting and arranging themselves. The green fetal cells have condensed together, and in red here are cells that will form the interface between the baby and the placenta. It seems these extra embryonic structures develop a little later in humans than expected from studies in other animals. Day 10. The whole thing increases in size, and bundles of cells start developing into support structures. Surprisingly, at this stage, the embryo can direct its own development with no input from the mother's tissues. By day 12, the outskirts of the embryo are preparing to bind more strongly to the wall of the uterus. After all, if this were a natural pregnancy, the embryo would be there for the next 9 months. You can even see little holes appearing, ready for the mother's blood vessels to start supplying the embryo with essential oxygen and nutrients. By now, the embryo is signaling its presence to the mother via a hormone, the one that pregnancy tests pick up, hcg, labeled here in yellow. After 2 weeks, the teams ended their experiments in line with the ethical 14-day limit. To study what happens after 14 days, researchers had to turn to different techniques. Recently, scientists have built artificial embryo-like structures from stem cells. Using these partial models, They can study things like cell signaling, or even the formation of the primitive streak, the crucial thread of cells which guides a process called gastrulation. That's the moment the embryo decides which end will become the head. Here they use human stem cells growing in an animal embryo to explore that process. But even after this early phase is over, there is still a lot of work involved in building a body. To study later phases, scientists have made and analyzed high-resolution 3D atlases of human embryos and fetuses. One team found that the left and right hands don't simply mirror each other when growing their nerves. Instead, some branches take random paths in each limb. Another group saw muscles that grew in early embryos only to disappear as the fetus developed, like these. As yet, they're not sure why. It's becoming ever clearer just how important a human embryo's first few weeks are. Many scientists hope that more research will lead to a better grasp of why some pregnancies fail and how birth defects arise, maybe even make in vitro fertilization work better. But some just want to understand exactly what happens to this tiny ball of cells in this short spark of time at the beginning of all of us.
So as you can see, they said those first few weeks are vital, and that's kind of what we're coming up with here. At 2 to 7 weeks, the embryo is 90% formed, so their basic structures are in place. The critical period is when embryo is most vulnerable to the environment. So that, again, being studying human behavior in the social environment. Then fetus is from 8 to 40 weeks. So that's from 2 months to 10 months. Some people have a baby at 10 months. But remember, the first 2 weeks are right after the period. So fertilization actually occurs at week 2. Refinement and growth of basic structures. The last 2 months, it starts storing fat. It gains like a pound every week and a half then. So at 24 weeks, the embryo has a chance of survival outside the womb. I think even recently they've gotten that up to 21 or 22 weeks. And then there's term pregnancy. So early term is if you're at 37 weeks up to 38 weeks and 6 days. The baby is considered full term at 39 weeks. And that's when you can even have a pregnancy induction. So if you're at 39, you can induce the baby to be born with hormones. Full term is all the way up until 40 weeks and 6 days. Late term is at 41 weeks. So again, the baby would be about, like 39 weeks old then. And then past term is 42 weeks and beyond. So that would be too much. There's some prenatal life support systems. So there's the placenta that gives the small molecules that pass between the mother and the embryo. There's also umbilical cord, which is kind of what connects to the embryo and placenta on our belly button. Sometimes they let the person watching the birth cut the placenta or the umbilical cord off. And then the amnion bag is which the embryo floats. So it has the amniotic fluid and whatnot. So abortion is the spontaneous induced ending of pregnancy. 75% of spontaneous abortions occur within the first 12 weeks. Not all vaginal bleeding is a miscarriage. Social worker plays a supportive role. Separate personal from professional values, and they have less regret. Hello. So here's your stages of labor. Oh, we're getting rid of it now?
Yep, you're getting that.
Oh. So the first stage of labor can last anywhere from 12 to 14 hours, and that's often when you are still at home. So the cervix dilates to 12 centimeters. The second stage of labor is from 10 minutes to 3+ hours. The baby's delivered. So if you get it delivered that quickly, you are very lucky. A lot of folks take 3 to 12 hours. And I feel like that's what we had to take on our firstborn. The third stage is from 5 to 30 minutes, and that's when the placenta is delivered, so that comes out. And then the fourth one is from 1 to 3 hours. So recovery, there's family time. The golden hour is like skin to skin, critical bonding and growth and development of the baby. So here's some important scores like 5.5 pounds to 9 is the average baby's weight with a cone-shaped head. Their APGAR score is the adaptation to life outside of the womb. So 1 in 5 minutes after birth, there's also their heart rate. If they're breathing, if they can breathe on their own, a lot of times you have to get them to cry to breathe on their own. It becomes a natural reflex. Also, they'll check the muscle tone and color at a 0, 1, or 2. 7 to 10 is considered good. 5 to 7 is poor. It may need a medical intervention. And then a score of 0 to 4 at 5 minutes is likely associated with neurological defects. So those are some of the challenges that come up with giving birth. Some of the complications at pregnancy could be like frequent vomiting or even vaginal bleeding that could lead to spontaneous abortion. That's in an early pregnancy. Also, hello, Shakira. Toxemia, that's due to protein in the urine. When you're pregnant, eclampsia, that's some of the stuff that the baby can suffer. Mom could have gestational diabetes. Also, intrauterine growth retardation. So some of the things that come up in pregnancy, here's some of the pictures and how it the baby turns around and can be then delivered. And you also deliver their placenta. Then some of the biophysical hazards are like drug use. Teratogen, that's any agent or substance that causes a birth defect. It increases a chance of miscarriage, low birth weight, cognitive abilities, etc. Drug use can cause addicted to infants, so they have some in the neonatal unit that have to get off of heroin during our opioid epidemic. They can test back to like 5 months on the baby's first poop. They can test everything that's in it because the baby hasn't released any of that for 5 or 6 months. So if mom had even sometimes alcohol, weed, heroin, other drugs that come up, and sometimes they do involve child protective services if that's the case to help get them maybe into rehab or treatment to make sure that they're not addicted during the baby's crucial growth months. So sometimes that drug use can make it be difficult to actively engage in their environment. So like increased risk for abuse. And then also alcohol is one of the biggest preventable causes of developmental disabilities. So they do a lot of stuff on fetal alcohol syndrome and just like showing how to prevent it. Basically not drinking even a drop or using mouthwash with alcohol. And it's important to have prenatal testing. That could be drug testing, ultrasound to identify anomalies, may require ethical decision of whether to terminate the pregnancy. So that actually has come up in some countries. I'll share that article as one of the extra credit discussions, but there is a challenge in China where they saw the baby was a female and they would terminate the pregnancy. This was also done at times in India, and so for the past 10, 15, 20 years, because they terminated females, they are about 35 million females short. Um, I think actually the baby will be tested right away. I remember my firstborn was about 2 years ago in a week. She's June 14th, 2020, and they do take a lot of tests just to make sure the baby is safe. So I don't think they are asked if you deliver at a hospital. Now, if you did like a home birth, that would be different. So it depends on where you are giving birth. You could give a home birth and use, I forget what they're even called, but there's a way to deliver without going to the hospital. And again, it's to make sure that they're safe because it's a pretty simple prevention measure. If there is heroin in the system, making sure the baby gets off heroin. If there is a need for extra help, it's given there. So the one I think my wife was annoyed about is they forced COVID tested her. So they take like a long strip and stuff it up her nose and made sure she did not have COVID. And actually, if she refused the COVID test, she had to go on to the baby COVID unit. So that was one that was kind of weird. Like some of the rules changed during coronavirus, but they said it was all for safety. You know, a lot of this stuff you don't know for sure. But as mentioned, ethical decisions to terminate the pregnancy in other countries where they did terminate females, they are around 35 million women behind. And there's large articles in newspapers about a lot of the men that live at home forever into their 30s, 40s with their mom because there are less marriages now. So some of the prenatal testing, there is ultrasound or sonogram. Actually, my wife is getting one right now because she's showing at the Pregnancy Center East, teaching the techs how to do a ultrasound and sonogram. They can pick up a heartbeat. I think we're at 10 weeks. So she's pregnant. We would have 3 under 2.5 years if all goes well. It's a New Year's baby. But they test all these different things to make sure the baby is safe. There's alpha fetoprotein blood screening. There's amniocentesis. There's chronic villus sample, the CVS. There's also timing and safety of administration of these different types of tests. And we're also considered a geriatric pregnancy. I'm 44 next week on Juneteenth, and my wife is 36. So if you're any age above 35, you're considered a geriatric pregnancy. They also do non-invasive testing based on cell-free DNA analyses. And then some ethical dilemmas come up with, again, terminating the pregnancy if fetus has major birth defect. So some have given that option. I think they've since made it illegal to terminate a Down syndrome pregnancy, although that is, considered a form of defect. The baby is usually okay, but just more like stubby fingers, a little bit lower IQ, but not as low. Like they still are really fully functioning with eating, sleeping, cooking. There's some that I think Victoria's Secret just put out their first Down's syndrome model, and showing that with Downs you can really do a lot of the same things that any human can do. Now, some birth complications. There's anoxia and potential causes. There's meconium aspiration and potential respiratory complications. There's malpresentation. So I know we list all these. Again, I don't expect you to memorize these, but just knowing how the baby develops with human behavior in the social environment, these critical months, because if you do want to have kids, knowing those first really months in the womb and first 3 years, like so much development is occurring. So proper nutrition, proper oxygen, all of those things that you can do to make a healthy child is, there's so many articles about it now. There's also perinatal difficulties, such as the cord roped around the neck. I know my brother had that, and sometimes they have to put you into birth right away. So after the baby tests positive for any drug, is they're immediately taken away. Um, from what I remember, when I worked at Claremont Recovery Center, if there was an illegal drug, um, usually heroin, tetrahydrocannabinols, and other things, I would say Child Protective Services does get involved. It may be just to make sure mom is not currently using and or addicted, or if she wanted to get treatment to like quit using because it could affect the baby. And I know with like legalized and medicinal stuff coming up, that is also changing. But in the past, yes, they made sure mom got treatment. But remember, overall, the main goal is family reunification. So they really want the baby with mom. They really want the family together. So a lot of times when they say all social workers do is take kids, well, they make sure they're in a safe environment, but the overall goal is always family reunification. So I would say nowadays, maybe if they were prescribed something medicinally for anxiety, they might have a talk about it, maybe see if there is a prescription. Now, as you're pregnant, you almost go off of most prescription drugs if you can, because a lot of those affect pregnancy. So my wife is even uh, for sure won't take like the Claritin decongestant. She'll take just the Claritin, but it's the decongestant that increases your heart rate. That can affect the pregnancy. So you really do. It kind of sucks. You can't take like a lot of medicine that you normally take um, for baby development. And you always see it on the back, like if pregnant or nursing, consult a doctor first. So really, I think it's about having the discussion and having a dialogue about how things are going. Will the baby be safe? Will they have a safe environment for brain development? Will they have all their needs met with like food, water, shelter? Um, and if so, they're good to go. If not, maybe they get placed with the mom's mom for a while or with like the dad's family, something like that. But um, I have not seen it as much recently, but I know in the past it definitely was something to make sure. During the heroin epidemic, it was really big because babies detox and they have like the shakes when they're first born. Um, let's see if I can show some videos. So it looks like these are still kind of newer-ish, like 2020, and um, I'll go into actual videos here. There's lots of different moms here. Here they tested for meth and then opiates. There's a false drug test that cost the mom her baby. That's kind of sad. Um, a mom who fled the hospital after infant tested positive for drugs. Here's one where the mom failed a drug test after eating a bagel with poppy seeds. So that kind of sucks. Hey, Tiona. Here's another one. Couple sues after baby taken when they ate a poppy seed bagel. So poppy seeds can test you positive for opiates. And that is definitely a big one. Mom charged with child abuse after taking 1-year-old and newborn. You see mother missing 4-year-old. Yeah, there's quite a few in here. So it looks like they are. Here's one that's 7 months ago. One's on meth. So again, it kind of goes back to that safety concern. These poppy seed ones are interesting because I've never seen that. So this is a minute 45. I'll at least listen to
They
this
had
one.
told me that they were going to be taking my son.
This is Eileen Bauer. She is reliving what she calls a humiliating moment. The call came from CYS one day after giving birth inside Jameson Hospital. Her son Brandon was taken from her after she was told she tested positive for drugs. Her reaction? How could this be possible?
For somebody to tell me that I'm an unfit mother, that I take drugs, that, there's all these allegations against me, it was kind of like really damaging.
She had received numerous drug tests. Everything negative, no history of drugs, period. On the day this happened, she went to a barbecue. The only thing that she could have even possibly eaten that even contained something that would give her a positive result would have been an item called Salad Supreme, which contained at least some poppy seeds.
Stanley Booker is Bauer's attorney. He believes the opiates were traced to the salad mixture Bauer used in a linguine salad for a cookout the day she went into labor. They're furious because the traces were so low, they were below the minimum reference level. But Stanley says CYS took Brandon from his mother anyway.
The child was bounced from, I believe, 3 different foster homes in a matter of 75 days. So, I mean, that type of conduct is outrageous.
To know that somebody else is raising my kid, somebody else is feeding him, somebody else is, bathing him, dressing him, making him the way that they want him to be, it was very hard.
Now, Bauer says what she's looking for out of this lawsuit, number one, changes to the drug policies at Jameson Hospital and also monetary damages. We have not heard back from CYS or Jameson Hospital on this lawsuit. Reporting live, Sheldon Ingram, Channel 4.
So there's a couple. Those are poppy seed bagels and a few other drug tests that I'm trying to find the most recent one, but certainly it still does happen. Some of these say like 7 months old and 1 year old and a few others. So I thought it would come to an end, but it looks like not so far. There's one with cocaine and those can stay in the system. Opiates are like 3, 4, 5 days, and then there's a few with cocaine here. So yeah, it probably is the normal run of tests that they do to make sure that the baby's safe and to make sure that the mom's well. A few more with cocaine, and it definitely still does happen. That looks like one during COVID. Then there's a few about partially vaccinated mother who birthed baby with COVID-19 antibodies. There's the one with the poppy seed again, and yeah, there is quite a few in here. So it may or may not answer your question, but just seeing that there is quite a few different cases that have, there's some with Percocet. Mom arrested after infant ingest Percocets. So making sure they're in a safe location. And looks like the bagel happens a lot too. So I didn't even realize that. That one can come up a lot. And I thought the stories would end, but it looks like they keep going. But yeah, this certainly comes up a lot, and There's a few where they're addicted to heroin, so the baby can be born addicted. And you see the full spectrum of different moms who've had these challenges and whatnot. So, getting back to the PowerPoints, as I said, we are going to finish up the whole class in the middle of July. So making sure you have the few major assignments left done before then. We did the example of the EcoMap and genogram. I know I've videotaped it a couple of times. I did my own on the board over there. And you can find dozens of examples online. And with chapter 3, I want to finish 4 next month, but see how many. We're about halfway through. So some of the high risk infant stuff that comes up. Right, yeah, I'm just adding the assignments as we get them the same way I've done before. So they're all in the syllabus. So if you want to see every single assignment that you have, they are in the syllabus. But as the next ones are due, so we just have, let's see here, you guys probably just have the genogram in hbse. I'll go into hbse here and make sure the EcoMap is the next one. And I showed you all how to do it last week, and there's lots of good activities on how to do it. So EcoMap, yeah, so the genogram is not due until tomorrow. Another new assignment, it doesn't look like anybody's turned it in yet, so make sure to turn that one in. It says, I have a few questions on the assignment due tomorrow. We are recording what we experienced from the group. Oh, right, yes. So with groups, you are writing in your syllabus at the end the observations of the group of Alcoholics Anonymous. So let me see if I can open that up for you guys. Like open, here's recent, yeah, 4202 syllabus. So at the end of your syllabus, there is actually all of the questions that you need. And open recent. Somebody's calling me from Florida. So yeah, you observe the mental health group. Ideally, not sure if any of you guys are in a mental health group. If you didn't find one, that's okay. But like Al-Anon family groups and Alcoholics Anonymous are the big groups to observe. And you answer all of the questions at the end of the syllabus. So make sure to go in and download your syllabus. I'll download it for you guys here in so go into Generalist Practice 2, make sure to download the course activities. Let's see here. Actually, it's going to be under content. So go into content, and then this is for when you lead a group. So that's a good one too. And then it's in digital course materials and making sure that you have the syllabus. Oh, they still give you guys access to the book for free. So there's the digital content of this book. That's good. So read now, and then so you can cite different things in your book, but go into the the content and table of contents. Oh, I put it in course schedule for you. So tomorrow, observation of a mental health group. Here's all the questions you would answer for that mental health group. So in the group assessment, it's the name of the group, primary purpose of the group, name, credentials, and characteristics of the leader, setting, agency, or building, appearance of the setting, room size, appearance of the room. Also, do you believe the setting contributed or detracted from the primary purpose of the group and why? So just going through these questions and making sure you answer those. And you can add in child development on how things come up with that with the group. And task maintenance, functions observed, those things you get from the book, which you saw I clicked in to access there. Group culture observed, so provide descriptive evidence, and then other observations. So you can also download a Word copy of it right into the group assignment, but just the different things that you guys would have and answering all of those questions. And then you submit it here. So yeah, that's somebody's answers to all of it. So don't want to give away all the answers, but that is the assignment for tomorrow. And then in the next few weeks, since we end middle of July, it'll probably actually be the last week of June. You'll lead a mental health group. So either you come in here in person or you videotape yourself leading a mental health group with your family. And you can do that from Girls Circle. That's one of the places that you can show leading a group and video of you leading a group. So I'll actually do a short one like description of the group you will lead. Either your own or from Girls Circle. Or week 1 through 10 of Girls Circle. So you can just go down the line and do Girls Circle. If we do it in person, how would that work? So I would film it in here. I may be your only audience, but you could bring people with you and film you leading the group here and in person. So that's up to you how you would want to lead it. And then obviously I would be able to film it from the YouTube live so everybody else can see it. And then that way you guys have the chance to come in person. So you could bring people. I at least have myself, so you would lead it to me as the audience and run through some of that Girl Circle stuff that we have. And again, adding in some of that stuff about human behavior and the social environment into that. So hopefully that answers your all's questions. I know we're deep into the class. An hour, I always like to leave you an hour to do work on your own and email me questions if need be. But I am here every day, and we will be crushing on chapters 4 and 5 here pretty soon too. Just because that's the weeks that we're on. So week 5. We do move a lot faster during the summertime, which makes it tough. week 5, and then next week we'll do week 6. About storming and norming. So, okay, you'll do, so if you do your video, Shakira, filming it as a Zoom call, it's fine. Make sure that it saves the video. So that's the one setting. I always do YouTube Live because I've never known how to do the Zoom and save the video recording of it, but just make sure you save the recording so you can submit that and then others can see it. So it's fine if you do it as a Zoom call. Being COVID era and coronavirus, just make sure that it is saved, or if you do it live during this group, I could maybe do a Zoom call onto this computer with you and then would film it through YouTube Live. So if that made sense, just making sure that it saves it and it's up for you to turn in as the assignment. So that's all I have for today. And I'm hanging on for questions if you guys had any, but go ahead and email them if you have them, and see you all on Thursday, actually. So have a good one.